Well, Razorback fans, it is upon us. It is a big day because this is the last day that players can withdraw from the NBA draft process. So what happens? Let's talk about it on today's Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Nabors. I am also the host of Out of Bounds. You can catch every weekday afternoon from 1 to 4 on 103.7 The Buzz and 103.7thebuzz.com. Hope everybody's having a wonderful Wednesday because it's the midway point of the week. It's a short work week for a lot of us. And I guess on my radio show, it's extra short because on Friday, Razorback baseball is going to be the early game. So that's kind of nice. Get to have a little earlier start to the weekend. It doesn't matter. You don't care. What you do care about is what we're going to talk about today. And it has to do with basketball. I know baseball's in full swing, and I know it's all about the regionals and who Arkansas is going to be playing and who they're going to be pitching and all that fun stuff. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a little bit. But I felt like this was a very important day to talk about basketball because we know that it is the end of the month of May. It's amazing how fast this year has gone. But now it's time for people to start making the decisions on whether or not they stay in the NBA draft or they withdraw their name and come back to college for another year. So what's this going to be like? Well, let's be honest. You only got two players that are really interested, or at least at this point in time, in position to possibly be going to the NBA or staying in college. It's about Devo Davis and it's about Jordan Walsh. Those are the two guys that are on the team currently that are still having their names in the NBA draft, but have a decision to make because they always also retained their eligibility. So let's talk about some predictions, shall we? Now, of course, some of you who may be listening to this podcast on Wednesday, who knows, maybe the announcements have already been made, and when you turn it on, you're like, yeah, idiot. Yeah, great predictions already happened, you moron. All right, then just take that for what it is and take that for what it's worth. But there are a few things, though, that I want to predict before the big announcements start happening and things that I feel like are going to happen with the Razorback basketball team. Now, we have had these conversations all year long and all offseason long about who's going to do what and what it's going to look like. But I'll say this. I have gone back and forth on my feelings about Jordan Walsh and Devo Davis. There was a time where I felt like both of them were gone. There was a time when I felt like both of them were going to come back. There was a time I felt like Devo was going to go and Walsh come back. And there was a time where I felt like Walsh was going to go and Devo came back. Like it has gone so through the loop of everything that I have felt like and with these guys. And it got to the point to where no matter what ended up happening, I was not going to be surprised by any of it. Like whatever ended up getting put out there or whatever they ended up announcing was going to be no surprise to me because that's just the way it's always been. But I will say this, since I've gone back and forth on it, my prediction, or at least my feeling on things, just based on what I've been hearing, is that you will have one of these players come back. And it's going to be Devo Davis. Now, I think that is the right move for Devo. I think that's a great move for Arkansas. When you talk about continuity and leadership, there's no one that's out there that is better at what he does than Devo Davis. The relationship that he has with Eric Musselman, the feeling and mutual respect that they have for one another, it is a huge thing to get Devo Davis back, and I believe that Devo Davis will return to Arkansas. Now, that then poses the question of, okay, so what about Jordan Walsh? Well, it's of my belief that Jordan Walsh will move on and go to the NBA. He will be a drafted player. I don't know if it'll be first round or second round. Doesn't really matter, but I believe Jordan Walsh will take his talents to the pros and will be an NBA draft pick, which Arkansas will have 4 NBA draft picks this upcoming year with Anthony Black, Nick Smith Jr., Ricky Council IV, and Jordan Walsh. So that's what I'm thinking. And honestly, it makes sense, and it's a good thing. I don't think anybody's going to be, mad that Jordan Walsh is leaving or mad that Devo Davis is coming back. I think it's going to be the best for everybody having the setup in this situation. Because you think about Devo, there's been times he's been frustrating. He's a high and a low player. His highlights are incredible, especially when it comes to March. When March Devo takes on, it's a whole new animal, which is exactly what you want to have from your particular players that are upperclassmen and are really good and had great years so far. Like, that's what you want to have. So he's great in that element, but it always seems like there's some stuff that goes on during the season that could be some frustration things coming out at times, whether it's some plays getting made here and there, some inconsistent offensive games, maybe some foul trouble, maybe some emotions. Like, there's a lot of stuff that kind of goes in and out. But at the end of the day, when you look at the complete body of work, Devo Davis is a major reason why Arkansas has had so much success over the past 3 years. Of course, Eric Musselman and the coaching job he does and the team always deserves a ton of credit. But Devo has been the big constant in all of that alongside Eric Musselman. And if you don't believe that, just go and rewatch the clip at the end of the Kansas game where you saw them, both Musselman and Devo, embrace each other and talk about just how much care that they have for one another. So I think it's going to be great. I think getting Devo back will be huge. And I think that it'll be something that Razorback fans can at least know what to expect out of getting Devo back. But that means that Walsh is gone. And Jordan Walsh, I thought that he was a player that took him a while to get it going. I felt like there was part of it where the McDonald's All-American 5-star player coming out of high school, like, I think that hurt him a lot more just because of with that comes such a high expectation. And not to say that he wasn't a good player, because he was. He was a really good player. But when people hear 5-star McDonald's All-Americans, they expect, okay, you need to be a player that can go for, 16 points and 8 rebounds a game, or 16 and 8 and assists, whatever it may be. People expect a next level. And I believe that if Jordan Walsh would have came into Arkansas as just like a 4-star player, like a high 4-star player, everyone would have been completely and totally fine and looking at him saying, yeah, he was a solid player. Because especially the way he played late and his length and his defense and his coachability and everything to go along with it, I think that was extremely helpful to him and extremely helpful to Arkansas. But I mean, is Jordan Walsh going to be remembered as one of the all-time great players in Arkansas history? Of course not. Like, that's something that's reserved for next-level elite athletes. But I think most people, if not all Razorback fans, will have a very positive feelings about Jordan Walsh and leaving and remembering him in a positive way. I don't think anyone's going to be like, yeah, that guy sucked. No one's going to be that. It's going to be more of appreciation and putting it in the work and trying really hard each and every game. And, just like a lot of these guys battling through injury and trying to be the best player they could be, that's how Jordan Walsh is going to be remembered. So there you have it. Again, that's just what I'm feeling. I'm feeling that it's going to be something to that extent, and that's going off of things that I've heard from people I trust. But that leaves one thing, though, doesn't it? Because you look at the scholarships, Arkansas has one more scholarship available after Walsh leaves, right? So who are they going to get? Who's he going to be? Is he going to be Grant Nelson? Because, he just withdrew his name from the NBA draft lottery or NBA draft process. Is it going to be him? No, it's not. I believe it's going to be Ron Holland, as what was originally predicted by so many media members locally here at Arkansas, as well as a lot of other people. I believe that Ron Holland will end up being a Razorback, and it will be announced today at the time of this podcast. So we've talked about him ad nauseum and about the impact that he can have and the type of player he can be. But assuming that it goes according to plan and assuming that he ends up being a Razorback, man, that's a heck of a squad. You got all 5 of those transfers, which we know is great. You got Trevin Brazile and Devo Davis and Mekhi Mitchell and Jalen Graham all returning this year. And then you have a guy like Ron Holland and Bayfall and Layden Blocker being some really good freshmen with some upside. You got a really good core group there. One that can win a lot of games and one that can be really good next year. A lot of offense, a lot of defense, good shooting, upperclassmen experience, leadership, continuity, the works. And assuming that it all goes according to plan in that regard, then you know that is a team where getting to the Final Four and getting to that level in college basketball is tough to do. We all know it is. But if you're able to put that team together and look at it on paper, I don't think there's going to be anybody in the country worth their salt that isn't going to see that roster and say, yeah, that's a championship caliber team. Arkansas will have a championship caliber roster next year. And I said it before and I will say it again. If this all works out the way I'm thinking, it's going to be the best and most talented roster overall that Eric Musselman has had at Arkansas. And that's a scary, scary thing. Now, they got to put it all together. We know that. Will it come with some bumps and bruises along the way? Of course. Will it come out to slow start in SEC play? Certainly seems to be the theme. But at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is what you do in March and what you do in the NCAA tournament. And we know how important it is to be playing your best basketball during that time. And Eric Musselman in Arkansas has proven time and time again that they are perfectly and totally capable of doing such a thing. So that's what I think is going to happen, and that'll be your team. That'll be your team next year for the Razorback basketball team. And I feel really good about it. You know, I know it's baseball season right now. We got to get to football first too, but man, I'm really excited about basketball. I really can't wait to see how all that plays out. Speaking of which, we'll talk a little football here in just a second, but folks, make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, and in this case, the NBA Finals, because right now, new customers get the no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's right, $2,500 in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. That's no joke. That's legitimate. That's big time. And a lot of people love betting on the NBA games, especially the NBA Finals coming up. There's no better place to get on all the action than America's #1 sportsbook. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get the no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, moving on into the next segment of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. SEC meetings have been going on down in Destin, Florida, which is always, to me, a little bit bloviated in most cases. Like, there's a lot of stuff that happens, and I'm like, I do not care. It doesn't matter. Just don't give me the labor pain. Just give me the baby. Let me know whatever you're deciding. But there's been a lot of smoke around this year's SEC meetings just because of the amount of things that are going on, changes, adjustments, additions, subtractions, all of those things. And I was even talking about on my radio show yesterday, it's incredible to think just how much college football has changed in 5 years, which I know every sport changes over time. But folks, 5 years ago, just think 5 years ago, that would have been 2018, roughly. I don't want to bring up the Chad Morris years, but around that time, if you're a Razorback fan, NIL was not a thing, really, even being discussed. Transfer portal wasn't a thing. Immediate transfer eligibility wasn't a thing. Super conferences and, you got Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC wasn't a thing. Broadcasting media rights and, like SEC going to ESPN when they've been on CBS for a long time. Like, that wasn't a thing. Like, just so much has changed and it's almost hard to keep up with. But one of the things that's been going on at SEC meetings has been the conversation of 8 or 9 conference games. Once Texas and Oklahoma get added in, and once the decision gets made as far as how they're looking ahead of it and everything. But this is just according to Ross Dellinger, which if you haven't followed him, he does an awesome job covering college football, especially things like this. But Greg Sankey, the commissioner of SEC, said the conference is poised to make a decision this week based on the 8 or 9 game schedule. Just in the conference play. He says the additional money from ESPN should not and is not a driving decision. The money follows, but it doesn't lead. Okay, sure it doesn't. Come on, man. Like, I can understand if you're saying that just for the sake of it, but don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining. Don't sit there and try to say that, you know what money's we follows. It's not what leads us in our decision making. Bull. That is such crap. It's not even funny. Like, I just laugh at that. And he says, when all you do is chase money, you make a lot of bad decisions. Well, you haven't made any bad decisions yet, I guess, but Yeah, don't tell me it's not about the money. It's all about the money. Always about the money. So that's what they're looking at is a 9-game schedule. And what that would do also is preserve teams that have 3 rivalries or games that they want to protect in their rivalries to be able to have them on an annual basis. So that's the hot topic. And there's apparently some teams that are all for them, and there's some teams that are very much against it. And so that's where you have the split of, if people want to go down that route or not go down that route when it comes to 8 or 9 conference games. Here's my thing, because I got to ask this question. Like, what do I think about it? Like, would I rather see 8 or 9 games? It's maybe a cop-out answer, but I look at it as I am all for a 9-game SEC schedule. I am all for it because I think that it makes sense for ESPN because that'll get more quality games at a more higher clip. I think it's great because you'll be able to play more teams more often. So say if you've always wanted to go and watch a Razorbacks take on, I don't know, pick a team, South Carolina or something like that. Or if you're someone who lives in Nashville or Lexington and Arkansas doesn't get to go out there that often. Well, if you don't get to watch them this year at that place, don't worry. Wait a year or two and you'll get to see them again in that place. Like, that's really nice, considering how it was before, where it was like if you wanted to see Arkansas and Georgia play in Athens and you just missed it the year before, where you're going to have to wait like 12 years until you can see it again. That stuff's over with. So that's where I would really like it as far as getting rid of the divisions and just going along with the way it's set up and the way they're looking at it currently. I'm all for that. The only reservation I have about the 9-game schedule is dealing with the future non-conference opponents that teams have. There's a lot of great games out there that are going to be played. There's a lot of great games. And I'm just looking at it from the Arkansas perspective. If they were moving to a 9-game conference schedule starting in 2024 or whatever, or 2025, and that was the way it was going to be, but then you lost your game against Notre Dame coming up in 2025 and going to Notre Dame later in the decade. And then you lost your game against Oklahoma State. I think you have 4 games against them. You lost your games against Utah. Like that I would not be for, because those are games that have been some that people have been very excited about, myself included. Like, I got to go to BYU this past year, and with the 9-game conference schedule, I may not have been able to do that. It could have gotten canceled, and especially the Notre Dame game, which I know I have a bunch of friends that are Catholic, and they're big on going up to Notre Dame and seeing that game, as well as Razorback fans, because it's like I will bet dollars to donuts that we will not see the Razorbacks play in Notre Dame ever again. Like, the odds of that in my lifetime, that happening, considering it hasn't happened ever, is very slim. So it's like you want to take advantage and go there and be a part of it for history. So it's like that's when I'm not for the 9-game conference schedule, if it means jeopardizing those non-conference games. Now, if there's a way to where you can make it work, where you can play 9 games and then have those extra ones against those big opponents, okay, so be it. It'd be tough to think about Arkansas in 2025 having 9 conference games and also playing Notre Dame, Memphis, and Arkansas State. Oh, that's a hefty schedule, hefty ask, but I'll be fine with whatever. At the end of the day, it's still going to be fine. I just really don't want to lose those games. So if there's a way to preserve those games and then go to 9 conference schedule, let's ride. Let's get it going. Let's get it done. I want to see as many SEC games as possible. I want to see Arkansas play as many SEC games as possible. I think it'll be in the best interest for everybody. But I guess we'll wait and see this week. We can talk a little baseball with the regional coming up in Fayetteville here in just a second, but we're going to take a break and we'll come back with more on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, so final segment of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I know a lot of you are going up to Baum Walker Stadium. I don't know why I had said it like that. I always forget to add the Walker. For the Fayetteville Regional this weekend. I'm going to be up there. I'm excited about it. Weather looks pretty good. And should be some really good games and some really good baseball. But one thing that I've tried to bring up with people about these games in particular is that there's a lot you should know. And I'm going to try to do these things for if you've never been to Baum Walker or if you've never been out in the hog pen, which I guess the tickets are sold out. So if you got one and you've never been, kudos to you. There's just a few things that I'm going to just throw out there that you just need to know. First off, folks, this is not a Razorback event. This is an NCAA event. And the NCAA has different policies than what the University of Arkansas has. So, for instance, if you're expecting cheerleaders or the RBI girls to go out there and dance on the dugouts, you're not going to get that because it's considered to be a neutral field and a neutral site. Even though you're hosting, it's neutral. Arkansas is going to be the road team at some point in time, which I still think is the stupidest rule of all time. Whether it's the regional or super regional or the SEC tournament, I do not care. Let's just talk about regional, super regional. If you're the hosting team, you should be the home team every game. I do not care about, fairness. Shut up. Your bonus and your benefit for being a great team with a great season and hosting the regional should give you dibs on being the home team. It is absurd that this is a thing. Makes no sense whatsoever. So just be aware of that at some point in time, Arkansas is going to be a road team in this, and it's really dumb. Also, for those of you going out into the hog pen, just remember, no glass bottles. Okay? No glass bottles. Got it? And bring cups. Okay? You feel me? See what I'm saying here? Good. Just remember that. Also, it's going to be hot. Hopefully it's not too hot, but bring plenty of sunscreen and drink a lot of water. I know a lot of you are going to have a good time out there, but make sure you're drinking as much water as possible because I've seen way too many people pass out there at Baum Walker, and that's a scary thing. So don't let that happen. But be courteous to everybody. Sit in your assigned seats. Just do the stuff of just not being a jackhole, essentially. Just be a good fan. Be good at it. Just have fun with it. But just be aware that this is a little bit different of an animal if you've never been before. It's a lot of fun, and it's an insane atmosphere that just doesn't get rivaled very often. But, again, just be aware of some of the differences it's going to have for an NCAA event compared to an actual Razorback baseball event there as well. Appreciate everybody listening in to Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or on Google Play. You can also get after me on Twitter at BuzzJohnNabors for any questions, comments, concerns that you may have. We'll keep it going from there. Same podcast time, same podcast channel tomorrow afternoon. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you then.